Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Lease with Dreams. Today, I want to talk about addiction because addiction has been a very prevalent theme in my life pretty much the entire time that I've been alive. I grew up in a family of people who were addicted to drugs. Both of my parents and two of my 5 siblings were addicted to opiates, namely heroin and fentanyl. And they also used meth, crack cocaine, and other quote-unquote less severe things, even though that's not really how that works, but things like obviously cigarettes and alcohol. And I want to talk about overcoming addiction. So I'm going to give you guys some background, some backstory on me. When I was very young, around the age of 8 or 9 years old, I had a friend, a quote-unquote friend, who I was hanging out with. My parents at the time were very deep into their addiction and they were not really supervising me or paying much attention to me, or giving me any kind of discipline or teaching me what I should or should not be doing. And as a result, I kind of fell into groups of people that I shouldn't have been around. And I had a friend of mine who introduced me to cigarettes when I think I was 9 years old. And he did the classic thing. I kind of knew that you weren't supposed to smoke cigarettes, but both of my parents and both of my siblings did. So it was kind of easy for me to get into. But I told my friend, I don't want to do this. And he was 12 or 13 and at the time. And he was like, well, if you don't smoke this cigarette, then I'm not going to be friends with you anymore, and blah, blah, blah. And when you're 9 years old, that's the end of the world. So I ended up smoking the cigarette. And over time, I kept falling into people. I kept attracting more people, other kids that were into that kind of thing. And I ended up getting addicted to cigarettes by the time I was 10 years old. And also smoking weed when I was 11. And because of the nature of my relationship with my parents and the mental state that they were in, they ended up providing cigarettes for me because in their mindset it was better to have it come from me than from somebody else for some reason. And so by the time I was 11 years old, I was actually smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. I was smoking Newport 100 menthols, and I was smoking a pack of them every day. And then shortly after that, I was put into foster care. I decided that I wanted to play sports in school when I was in foster care, so I switched to chewing tobacco. Not long after that, vapes became a prevalent thing. So by the time I was 18 years old, I was using cigarettes, chewing tobacco, and vaping all at the same time. And I was very, very deep into that nicotine addiction. It was not to toot my own horn in some weird way, but I was very, very deeply addicted to nicotine in a way that I kind of don't see in other people very often. People have difficulty quitting, but it's by the time I was 20 years old and I started to try quitting, I'm 24 now. It was this, the withdrawal symptoms and also my psychological attachment to using nicotine was so powerful that it was I wanted to literally rip my hair out, and I would just I was completely incapable of functioning without nicotine. And that also bled over into other things. That exposure to addiction and my own addiction with nicotine led to things like borderline alcoholism, I'll call it. I was the kind of person who I didn't drink very frequently. I would drink like once a week, which is actually pretty frequent in the grand scheme of things, but not when you compare it to like how often some people drink and don't consider themselves alcoholics. But I would drink, like once to 3 or 4 times a week, depending on what was going on. But my problem really was that when I started to drink, I didn't know when to stop. And so I would have 5, 6, 7 drinks. And then by the time I got that deep, I had this mindset that I would just continue to drink and drink really quickly and really fast and a lot at a time. And, it got to the point where I was going to parties and like, I went to this graduation party for one of my friends and I literally drank 30 beers when I was there. I drank an entire 30 pack of Busch by the time that party was over in about 10 hours. Threw up everywhere. I lost like 8 hours. I don't remember like 8 hours from that time. And other embarrassing things, of course. So, addiction is not something that I'm unfamiliar with. And the point that I'm trying to make with this video today is that you can overcome addiction. If it seems like it's insurmountable to you, it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's heroin addiction, whether it's alcohol, whether it's cigarettes, maybe you vape too much, you can overcome that. And what I notice about addiction is that truthfully, the hardest part of stopping is not really the act of stopping in the first place. Because actually, when you truly decide that you want to stop, that it no longer serves you, the act of stopping is actually quite easy. Because when you're in a mental space where you are ready to quit, you are ready to stop because you no longer want this for you, you no longer enjoy it, it's not doing anything for you anymore, and you want to walk away from it, then all of the withdrawal symptoms, all of the suffering that you have to go through, the sleepless nights, becomes something that you are willing to deal with. And so the key to worming your way out of the wretched claws of addiction is to bring yourself into a mental state of willingness. You have to bring yourself into a mental state of willingness where you are willing to let go of this thing no matter what it takes. And now, what does that look like? The problem is not the addiction. The primary problem, I should say, is not the addiction itself. The primary problem is that you are using the addiction to quell something inside of you that you don't want to deal with. We use drugs and we use substances because they help us deal with difficult things that we don't want to deal with anymore, whether that be emotions, whether that be situations. That's why some people, if you notice, like people smoke or drink socially, that's because they have social anxiety. That's because they don't know how to be themselves around people, and those things make it easier for them to do so. And so let's take that as let's use the easy example first. Somebody who smokes or drinks or uses drugs socially. How do you solve the problem of needing to use drugs or any kind of substance in a social way? Well, you learn how to quell your social anxiety. And quelling your social anxiety has to do with learning how to love yourself and not placing value in the opinions and ideas of other people and how they view you. But the act of letting go of using a substance in a social way requires you to develop a love for yourself, requires you to develop a high opinion of yourself, regardless of what other people say or think about you. You have to let go of the fear of being awkward. You have to let go of the fear of people not liking you. You have to let go of the fear of not being the liked person or the center of attention when you're in a social situation. That's how so you have to let go of the primary issue, the primary problem that you have underlying the addiction. You see, addiction is a symptom. People think that addiction is the disease. Addiction is a symptom of an underlying issue. Now, the harder version of this is the day-to-day, I cannot function without this substance addiction. And that was me with nicotine and alcohol. Now, this has to do with your own personal life. You are not comfortable with the silence in your own head. You're not comfortable sitting silently with your thoughts. Why is that? Because you are deeply, deeply, deeply unhappy with yourself. You are deeply, deeply, deeply unhappy with your life situation. You are deeply, deeply, deeply unhappy with your job, with where you live, with the people you're surrounded by. Maybe you are broke and not having money is making you incredibly depressed. This is, of course, an oversimplification. Not having money is making you incredibly depressed. That's an oversimplification, but you know what I mean. So you see, addiction is not something that comes out of nowhere and ruins somebody's life, and addiction is the problem that we need to solve. And that's the problem that we have in our society today, is that when we see somebody who is addicted to something and that person wants help, we try to treat the addiction. And instead, what we need to be doing is treating what is happening underneath the addiction. We need to be treating what is causing the addiction. I was addicted to cigarettes and nicotine for like 18 years or something. No, sorry. I was addicted to nicotine for at least 12 to 14 years. And I was deeply unhappy with my life situation, who I was, where I was, who I was around. I was incredibly unhappy with that. And something I realized was, one time I took a trip up to my aunt's lake house. And my aunt, I've been kind of estranged from my family because my parents and my siblings kind of became, through their addiction, they kind of became this like black sheep part of the family. So I have part of my family that is relatively, at least compared to my realm, relatively successful, relatively well off. And I was always very depressed because I was in a terrible situation. And I realized that when I went to my aunt's house and I stayed with her for a week to basically have like a mini vacation, and I was up on the lake and it was beautiful and it was so nice. And I actually forgot that I was even addicted to nicotine for a while. I would go like the entire day without using chewing tobacco, without smoking. And I realized in that moment that it wasn't the tobacco, it wasn't the nicotine that was the problem. It was my own internal world that was causing me, my own internal turmoil was causing me to look outward and search for something external of me to quell the pain and the suffering that I was feeling inside. The loneliness and the deafening silence was something that I felt the need to quell. I felt the need to deafen it, to dampen it, to numb it. And so I was looking for something external of me that was easy. It's easy. See, the thing is that the easiest way to quell your suffering in any given moment is to go out and find something external of you that is going to give you a temporary numbing agent. It's going to give you a temporary relief from that suffering that you're experiencing. And when you're really, really deep in that suffering, of course, you're going to be looking for anything to get you out of that. The problem is that it doesn't get you out of it. It only is temporary. It's a very temporary solution, and everybody knows that. Everybody does. And so I can't speak on specifics. I can't look at you and tell you exactly what you need to do to get out of this, but I need you to understand that if you are suffering from addiction right now, it is not addiction that is the problem. The addiction arises from a problem that is already existing within you, because you are using that addiction to ease the pain and suffering that you are feeling inside. So stop trying to treat the addiction and start trying to improve your internal world. Now the problem is that depending on what it is you're addicted to, whether nicotine in a certain way is relatively easy, right? Because with nicotine, I am not when I use nicotine, I don't get high. So when I use nicotine, I am not putting myself in a state of mind that I'm incapable of looking at my internal world. I can use nicotine and simultaneously introspect and assess my state and make decisions, right? So that's, in one way, nicotine is much easier. The problem with things like heroin and alcohol, when you're addicted to these substances, you are incapable, during the experience, you are incapable of looking inward. You're incapable of assessing, of making an accurate assessment of your current mental, physical, and spiritual state. And because of that, that's the negative feedback cycle of things like heroin and alcohol addiction, is that the more you do it, the less you pay attention to your internal world. The less you pay attention to your internal world, the worse it gets, the more that you do alcohol or heroin. See, and you need to break that cycle, even if it is temporary. That's why they say when a person is in recovery, it doesn't matter. It does matter, but it doesn't at the same time if you relapse, because that time of sobriety that you experienced, if you use that time of sobriety as a time of introspection and figuring out how to make yourself feel more at peace with who you are, if you use that time of sobriety and that time of separation from the substance to learn how to ease the suffering in a healthy and internal way instead of using external factors, when you go back to the substance, if you go back to the substance, it's okay. Don't punish yourself for doing that, because you're only going to make it worse. If I'm a heroin addict, imagine that I am a heroin addict, and I decide one day that I want to try to stop. I go through the withdrawals. Maybe I get on Suboxone, something. I go through the withdrawals, and I have a time of sobriety, even if it's only like a couple weeks. The most important thing for a heroin addict to do or an alcoholic to do during that time of sobriety is to introspect and start trying to rebuild your internal world and supply love for yourself. You need to learn how to love yourself and stop tricking yourself into thinking that, oh, I'm out of it now, so I can just do whatever. I can just live my life like a normal person, because unfortunately you cannot, not yet. Because when you're in that time of sobriety, that is the most important thing. That is the most important thing that you can do for yourself, is learn how to rebuild that internal world in a way that you can supply love for yourself. You need to learn in those times of sobriety, because the fact of the matter is that when you are heavily addicted to a substance, you should never consider yourself to not be addicted to that substance. Think of the times of sobriety more as a remission. And anticipate that maybe someday you're going to relapse and you're going to go back to it. Because if you are heavily addicted to that substance, the harsh reality is that it's probably true. But you don't need to punish yourself for that. And you don't need to look down on yourself for that. Because looking down on yourself is only going to destroy your inner world even more and make you even more incapable of supplying love for yourself. And maybe the next time that you relapse, it's going to get worse. So instead, when you're in this remission state between relapses, if you're capable of stepping away from this intoxicating substance for long enough, it could be a week, 2 weeks, rebuild the internal world, learn how to supply love for yourself, learn how to forgive yourself for the things that you've done, learn how to be comfortable with who you are, learn how to supply energy and love to yourself so that you can improve your world, and understand that there is a world around you for you to improve. And that one of the ways that you can improve the world around you, make things brighter, make things come to you, supply abundance to yourself. One of the ways that you can do that is by being selfless and by showing love and kindness and generosity to the people around you. So my suggestion, if I had to give you a concrete suggestion, is if you are heavily addicted to a substance right now and you are capable of, just for a short period of time, suspending that addiction, pulling away from it and allowing yourself to be sober for even a short period of time, spend that time supplying love to yourself and giving love to other people. Spend that time being a good person. Not because you have to act, not because you want to act like a good person, but if you can act in love, if you can act in generosity, you will start to develop a better opinion of yourself. And by developing a better opinion of yourself, the world starts to not seem so dim and dark and scary. And the less dim and dark and scary the world around you seems, the less need you'll feel to look for something external of you to supply ease of suffering. And if you are suffering from addiction, I want you to know that I love you. I want you to know that you are not alone. You're not a bad person. There's nothing wrong with you. And you can overcome it. And that's coming from somebody that this topic is a very, very close to home thing for me. It caused, in both distal and personal ways, a lot of suffering for me through my life. And all of the people that were heavily in addiction that caused suffering for me, I have forgiven. And I have also forgiven myself for all of the suffering that I've caused to other people while I was in addiction. And I'm not perfect. I've gone in and out of my own addiction, and I understand. Like, I know that nicotine is not even anything compared to the heavier things, and I have had my own struggles, you know, going back and forth with that. So I can only imagine how somebody, if you're watching this and you're recovering from heroin or any, I keep saying heroin because that's just like the one that is most close to me, because that's what everybody used around me. But if it's anything, meth, crack, any kind of substance, whatever it is, it doesn't even matter. I can't even imagine how you feel. But I don't want you to be scared, because you're not alone. And I see the part of you, if I know that inside of you exists a person that is not your addiction. I know inside of you exists that a person that is not the things that you do while under the control of the substance that you're on. I know that you're more human than that. And I love you. So with that, thank you guys for watching. I know this was kind of a heavy episode, but I felt the need to say that. It came from the heart. So much love to everybody. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.